Lisa Booth won't say which of these three options she's voting for to come the primaries, but she's a senior fellow at Independent Women's Voice, and she joins us tonight. So,
can I choose
Lisa,
D, none of the above?
You may have to.
Okay, yeah.
And that kind of is the tragedy. I mean, presumably there are some non-demented Democrats left out there. I mean, there are, and they don't really have too many options, do they?
They don't. And I thought what was really interesting about last week's debates is I think there's sort of two prevailing themes that are going on right now. One is sort of this directional divide in the party, and then the second is a generational divide. And on the directional front, you showed some of the clips from John Delaney calling out his party. But what we saw on the first night of debates is you had these really radical progressive candidates like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren on the stage. And then you had all of these moderates like Tim Ryan, John Delaney, John Hickenlooper as well. And essentially the message from the moderates was, hey, look, we are taking on these policy positions that may play with primary voters, but they don't in a general election. And we see that in polling, even policy positions like giving health care to illegal immigrants. So Democrat primary voters may favor it by 15 points. But if you look at overall voters, they oppose it by 28 points. And here's a clip from John Hickenlooper talking about this.
This notion that you're going to take private insurance away from 180 million Americans, who many of them don't want to give it. Many of them do want to get rid of it, but some don't. Many don't. Or you're going to, in the Green New Deal, make sure that every American is guaranteed a government job if they want. That is a disaster at the ballot box. You might as well FedEx the election to Donald Trump.
So clearly making that very point of, hey, look, we're going to throw this thing if we're taking on all these radical policy positions that are out of step with the general electorate. And I also thought on the directional front, something that was interesting that surprised me was a lot of the candidates in the second night taking on former President Obama's policy positions, who's still immensely popular with Democrats. I thought that was a really interesting take and really surprised me. And then the second theme I mentioned earlier on the generational front. So you've got Vice President Joe Biden, who's the leading candidate, who's 76 years old. And there was this interesting New York Times article where they interviewed about 50 Democrat insiders, and one of the main concerns was his age and his inability to deliver a crisp message. And we really saw that last week. Take a look at this.
Dozy on me, kid. The fact is that the bills that the future president here, that the senator is talking about, if you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. Thank you very much.
So just a lot of stumbles there from Joe Biden. I think David Axelrod kind of hit the nail on the head where he said, the good news is for Joe Biden, this is probably the best he can do. And the bad news for Joe Biden is this is probably the best he can do.
So I just want to end on this, inject some reality into this. You are always talking to people who cover politics for a living, right, and to political strategists from both sides. How many people do you know who believe that Joe Biden will actually be the Democratic nominee?
So I think it's sort of split. But here's where things change, and I think where things start looking different. Even if you look ahead at the September poll, or the September debate, rather, the requirements jump significantly. So the field's probably going to be cut in about half of who actually ends up on the debate stage. And what's going to be interesting is a lot of these moderates are not going to be on that debate stage. They're not going to hit the polling requirements or the unique donor requirements as well. And I also think if you're Joe Biden, you're more exposed because you then get follow-up questions from the moderator. There's also more time to speak. So I think the dynamics start changing for him when there's more exposure.
Yeah, time is not on his side on many levels. Lisa Booth, great to see you tonight. Thank you.